Chapter 8 The Burden of Knowledge. The weight of Snape's stare pressed down on them like a physical force as the three friends stood in the dim confines of his office. The damaged book trembled slightly in Hermione's hands, its corrupted pages seeming to pulse with the same sickly violet light that had emanated from the mirror shard. Harry felt the familiar chill of dread settling in his stomach as he met the potions master's obsidian gaze. Ron shifted uncomfortably beside him, his injured shoulder causing him to wince with each small movement. "The library, Professor," Harry began, his voice steadier than he felt. "We found Hermione trapped in a mirror dimension. A shard from Lockhart's old vanity had corrupted part of her research." He gestured toward the book. "The entities, they fed on our fears, showed us twisted reflections of our worst insecurities. But we discovered their weakness. They're tied to the reflective surfaces they manifest through. Shatter the reflection, and they lose their anchor." Snape's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes sharpened with interest. He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the damaged tome in Hermione's possession. "Show me," he commanded, extending one pale hand toward the book. Hermione hesitated for a moment before placing the heavy volume in Snape's hands. He opened it carefully, his long fingers tracing the brittle, faded pages where the corrupted shard had rested. The areas around the damage seemed to leach color from his fingertips, leaving them unnaturally pale. "Fascinating," he murmured, though his tone carried no warmth. "The corruption doesn't merely destroy, it consumes, feeds on the knowledge itself." He looked up sharply. "What specifically did these entities show you?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione, the memory of their manifested fears still raw. "They used our personal vulnerabilities," Hermione said carefully. "For me, it was abandonment, being left behind by my friends. For Ron," she trailed off, looking at him with concern. "A chessboard," Ron muttered, his face flushing red, "made me feel insignificant, like I didn't matter, like I was just a piece to be sacrificed." His voice was thick with embarrassment and residual fear. Snape's gaze shifted to Harry, expectant and penetrating. Harry felt exposed under that stare, as if Snape could see directly into his mind. "They showed me versions of Ron and Hermione turning their backs on me, walking away. It played on the fear of being alone, of driving away the people I care about." The admission felt like pulling shards of glass from his throat. "Predictable," Snape said with his characteristic sneer, though there was something calculating in his expression. "The entities exploit existing fractures in relationships, amplify doubts that already exist." His gaze lingered meaningfully on the space between Harry and Ron. "Your recent disagreements provided fertile ground for such manipulation." Ron's jaw tightened. "We sorted it," he said defensively. "Worked together to get Hermione out." "Did you?" Snape's voice was silky, dangerous. "Or did you merely postpone the inevitable? The corruption feeds on emotional instability, Weasley. It will return to the same wounds again and again until they are properly healed or—" He let the sentence hang unfinished but ominous. Hermione stepped forward, her analytical mind cutting through the tension. "Professor, the book mentioned entities inhabiting fractured reflections, but those sections are now unreadable. We need to understand what we're dealing with. How many more shards are there? How do we find them before they create more incursion points?" Snape closed the damaged book with a soft thump, his expression grim. "More than you might imagine, Miss Granger. Lockhart's vanity was merely one of several mirrors damaged during the incident that fractured the mirror of Erised. The blast sent fragments throughout the castle. Some were found and disposed of, but others he moved to a cabinet behind his desk, withdrawing a rolled parchment. Others remain hidden, embedded in walls, fallen into crevices, scattered in forgotten corners." He unrolled the parchment, revealing a detailed map of Hogwarts. Red marks dotted various locations throughout the castle, far more than Harry had expected. These are the confirmed locations where mirror fragments have been discovered. The blue marks indicate areas where disturbances have been reported. Unexplained cold spots, whispers in empty corridors, reflections that don't quite match reality. Harry studied the map with growing alarm. The marks were everywhere, in classrooms, dormitories, even the Great Hall. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "Since the beginning of term," Snape replied curtly. The headmaster's absence has complicated containment efforts. The ministry remains unaware, and it must stay that way. Panic would only feed the entities further. He rolled up the map. Your discovery of their weakness is valuable, but it raises new concerns. If they can be destroyed by shattering their anchor points, what happens to the dimensional spaces they've created? Do they simply collapse, or do they fragment further, spreading the corruption? The question sent a chill through the room. Hermione paled. We didn't think, when we shattered the reflections, we just wanted to escape. But if we've made things worse, unknown, Snape said bluntly, which is why your little adventure, while providing useful intelligence, was also profoundly reckless. His gaze swept over all three of them. The entities you encountered were likely scouts, probes testing the boundaries of their prison. By engaging with them, by entering their domain, you may have alerted them to the existence of more substantial threats. Ron shifted nervously. More substantial threats? You mean us? I mean, Snape said with exaggerated patience, that you have now been marked. The entities have tasted your fears, mapped your vulnerabilities. They will remember you, and they will seek you out. He paused, letting the implications sink in. The cold you feel in your shoulder, Weasley, is not merely residual magic. It is a connection, a thread they can follow. Ron's hand flew to his injured shoulder, his face draining of color. You mean they can find me? Track me? Potentially. Snape's tone was matter of fact, but Harry caught the flicker of concern in his dark eyes. Which is why you will report to the hospital wing immediately after this conversation. Madame Pomfrey has been briefed on the unusual nature of certain injuries this term. She has treatments that may sever such connections. Hermione was staring at the spot where the book had been damaged, her mind clearly racing. Professor, if the entities can mark people, if they're learning about us, what's their ultimate goal? What do they want? Snape was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more serious than Harry had ever heard it. To cross over completely, to anchor themselves in our reality permanently. The mirror dimension you escaped is not their natural habitat. It is a staging ground, a foothold. Each successful incursion, each person they mark, each fragment of knowledge they corrupt, it all serves to weaken the barriers between dimensions. The implications hit Harry like a physical blow. The mirror of Erised, the patch I applied, it's not holding, is it? The stabilizer was always temporary, Snape confirmed. A bandage on a severed artery. The mirror's fracture is the primary breach point. As long as it remains damaged, the entities will continue to seep through, to establish new anchor points throughout the castle. He fixed Harry with an intense stare. Which brings us to the true purpose of your presence here. Harry felt his stomach drop. What do you mean? Snape moved to another cabinet, this one secured with multiple locks and what appeared to be several protective charms. The permanent repair of the Mirror of Erised requires more than alchemical stabilizers. It requires a willing sacrifice. Someone must enter the mirror's fractured space and repair it from within, sealing the breach at its source. He withdrew a small crystalline vial filled with swirling golden liquid. This is a dimensional anchor. It will allow one person to maintain their connection to this reality while operating in the mirror space. But the process is dangerous. The entities will sense the intrusion immediately. They will throw everything they have at stopping the repair. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire and the distant drip of water somewhere in the dungeon depths. Harry stared at the vial, understanding flooding through him with cold certainty. You want me to go back in there, alone? Not alone, Hermione said immediately, her voice fierce. If Harry goes, we go with him. Absolutely not, Snape snapped. The anchor can only protect one person. Additional presences would destabilize the connection, trapping everyone inside permanently. His gaze fixed on Harry. And it must be Potter. The mirror has already shown him visions of the future. It has established a connection. That connection can be used to navigate the fractured space, to find the breach point. Ron stepped forward, his face set with determination despite the pain in his shoulder. Then we find another way. We're not sending Harry in there to face those things alone. There is no other way, Snape said coldly. Every day we delay, more fragments activate, more incursion points open. Soon, the entities will have enough anchor points to begin manifesting in our reality without need of reflective surfaces. They will walk among us, feeding on fear and despair until nothing remains but their twisted dimension overlaying our own. Harry closed his eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He thought of the mirror's vision, his older self, alone and broken. Was this how it began? With him walking willingly into danger while his friends were forced to watch? But then he thought of the entities, of their hunger, of what would happen if they were allowed to spread unchecked. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked quietly. "The next new moon," Snape replied. 3 days. The dimensional barriers are weakest then, making the crossing easier but also more dangerous. After that, the window closes for another month, and by then, he didn't finish the sentence. Hermione was shaking her head frantically. "There has to be research we can do. Other options. The restricted section, or maybe the room of requirement, could provide." "Miss Granger," Snape interrupted, his voice not unkind but firm. "I have spent weeks researching alternatives. The headmaster's private library, the Department of Mysteries archives, even certain less savory sources of magical knowledge. This is the only viable solution." He looked at each of them in turn. "The burden of knowledge is often heavier than ignorance. You wanted answers. Now you have them." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears and the weight of impossible choices. Finally, Harry opened his eyes and looked at his friends. Ron's face was pale but resolute, his loyalty clear despite his fear. Hermione's eyes were bright with unshed tears, her brilliant mind already working on problems that might have no solutions. "I need to think," Harry said finally, "and we need to get Ron to Pomfrey before that connection gets any stronger." Snape nodded curtly. "Wise. But do not take too long, Potter. The entities grow stronger with each passing hour, and your window of opportunity narrows." He moved toward his desk, dismissing them with the gesture. "And remember, speak of this to no one. The fewer people who know, the fewer targets the entities have to focus on." They filed out of the office in silence, the weight of Snape's revelations pressing down on them like a physical burden. The dungeon corridor felt colder than before, and Harry found himself glancing nervously at every reflective surface they passed. The suit of armor near the staircase seemed to watch them with hollow eyes. A puddle of water on the stone floor reflected not their feet, but empty space. "Harry," Hermione said quietly as they climbed toward the main floor, "we'll find another way. We have to." But even as she spoke, Harry could hear the doubt in her voice, and in the distance, so faint it might have been imagination, he could swear he heard the whispers starting again. The entities knew where he was now. They were waiting, and in 3 days, he would have to face them in their own domain, armed with nothing but a crystal vial and the desperate hope that he could seal the breach before they tore him apart. The burden of knowledge, indeed. Length: medium chapter completed, approx 2,400 words. Assessment: chapter successfully escalates the arc's central conflict by revealing the true scope of the mirror corruption and establishing the impossible choice Harry must make. Strong character dynamics explore the trio's solidarity under pressure while building toward the arc's climactic confrontation. Editor notes: key narrative alignment directly advances Cracked Reflections arc by revealing the full threat scope and establishing Harry's ultimate challenge, entering the mirror dimension alone to seal the breach. Character development explores the trio's unity forged through shared trauma while introducing new tensions around Harry's burden as the chosen solution. Snape's role as reluctant mentor deepened. Style consistency maintains third-person limited POV, primarily Harry, past tense, everyday vocabulary level. Dialogue reflects established character voices and relationships. Continuity directly follows Chapter 7's confrontation with Snape, addressing the damaged book, Ron's injury, and the discovered weakness while expanding the threat's scope. Structural flow moves from revelation, exposition, mounting dread, impossible choice. Scene remains contained in Snape's office, using dialogue and internal tension to drive pacing. Pacing builds tension through gradual revelation of the threat's true scope, culminating in the 3-day deadline and Harry's burden of choice. Sets up arc completion while maintaining character focus.